If you don't know Mr. Live Aronson, let me introduce him. Live Aronson is the matchmaker of Harlem. He was in the matchmaking business in Harlem when there were only 2 synagogues for the whole community, and both were half empty even on holidays. These synagogues were built hoping the area would grow. Not many people have lived in Harlem as long as he has, so he is respected a lot. It is like being from an old, respected family. Live Aronson's couples now have grandchildren, and he keeps track of all of them for future matches. In his notebook, he has 3 sections: men, women, and widows. A 3-day-old boy is put in the men's section with his birth date and his parents' money. When one of his couples, the Abrahams, invite him to their daughter's christening, he puts the little girl in the women's section. Next to each name are numbers that Mr. Aronson changes often over the years. If the numbers are next to a man's name, it means how much dowry he deserves. Numbers next to a woman's name mean how much dowry her father can give. A line across the name means death, marriage, or, and this makes Mr. Aronson very angry, love marriage, for which no fee was given. If Mr. Aronson hears that Mr. Goldberg made a lot of money in a real estate deal, he raises the numbers next to Miss Sadie Goldberg's name. When Baruch Levinson went bankrupt, the $10,000 dowry for his daughter in Mr. Aronson's notebook went down to almost nothing, just enough for a tailor, or, if she is lucky, a little more. Live Aronson's little notebook has the history of all the Harlem fortunes and the lines drawn across names, more often in the last few years, and Aronson is still not a rich man from matchmaking fees, mean only one thing: the modernization of Harlem. The love matches Mr. Aronson is so against. Now that you know the matchmaker and his methods, I will tell you the story of his daughter. A more beautiful girl than Leah Aronson was never seen in Harlem. Even as a child, the neighborhood called her Beautiful Leah, 2 eyes like big prunes, lips like cherries, and cheeks like a red apple, said the fruit man on the corner. And a more dutiful daughter never lived. She almost never went to any parties. Her mother was sick, so she took care of everything in the apartment. It was always very clean. Her father invited people to his home to talk business, and to make them feel at home, he would set the old samovar, a special tea kettle, on the table. And did the brass shine? Yes, it did. The whole house was so clean you could pass a white handkerchief over the floor and not find a speck of dust. Her own dress, her mother's old black silk gown, and her father's clothes were always like they had just come from the tailor. It was all Leah's work. But all that did not help Leah get a husband. She was not in her father's book. She was already 16, and her father never thought about her future. Why should he? There was no fee in it. Then something happened. Live Aronson invited Abraham Goldberg to his home for tea and arranged for Mrs. Fowler to come in and see Mrs. Aronson. Mrs. Fowler got an insurance policy and 2 houses from her dead husband. But when Abraham Goldberg saw Leah, it almost spoiled the match with the widow. It took 3 months to get the deal through, and it happened only when Goldberg was almost bankrupt. When Goldberg comes to see me, I don't want you to be around much, Leah, or you will spoil the deal. It's $400, you understand. Leah understood. $400 was a lot of money. But when would she get married? Her sick mother thought about that many times and talked to her husband about it. In about 2 years from now, Dora Summer will be ready. She is 15 now. By that time, Rabinowitz's son will just finish college and will need money to start his life, so it will be a sure deal. My fee will be about $2,000. Summer, the butcher, is making money so fast he can't count it. Then, I will not forget my daughter, Leib Aronson explained. Yes, Leib, but suppose. That can't be, woman. Dora Summer will not make a love match. She's cross-eyed. I did not mean that. But suppose Rabinowitz becomes successful on his own. You know what a good family he comes from. Will he then let his own son marry a butcher's daughter? Suppose nothing. A butcher in America is as good as a rabbi if he has money. Believe me, Summer will give all he has for a doctor as a husband for his cross-eyed daughter. It was all so certain, as Mrs. Aronson later explained to Leah, that the girl began to look at Dora Summer as her benefactress. Dora was a walking dowry for her. The whole Aronson family was interested in Dora's welfare and her fast-growing fortune. Aronson made some money, a small fee here and there, while waiting for the big deal to happen, but that time was not to be. Cross-eyed Dora met a cousin from Philadelphia and married him just when Rabinowitz's son got his degree. And to ruin every other plan, this young fool actually married a Christian girl he knew in college. Leah was 18. She decided to find her own way. There was a young bookkeeper, a brother of her only girlfriend, Fanny Schumann. He was nice to look at. He was also very ambitious. After she met him at the Schumann's house, he invited himself for a Sunday evening at the Aronsons. Fanny Schumann whispered in Leah's ear, "Catch him. I hate Gussie Schwartz." Things went well, but slowly. Leah arranged the young man's visits so he would come when her father was not home. Yet, in the third week, Leib Aronson met the visitor. "Hello, Isaac Schumann. Look what a big man he is. How old are you now?" 24, Mr. Aronson. 24. Wait, I think you are older. And out he took that little notebook. You will be 26, my boy, next month. After a few minutes of silence, Leib Aronson, the marriage broker, said to his daughter, "Make this samovar and leave us alone, please. I have something to talk to Mr. Schumann." Leah trembled and cried as she went to the kitchen. When she came back to the front room, she heard her father say to the young man, "Fanny is nearly 25. She has to marry. Without a dowry, it's a sin to Israel. She is your sister." Leah cried, but Leib Aronson could not lose a double fee. Besides the great need, Aronson was also urged by professional pride to make such a clever deal and make the same money pay a double fee. Gussie Schwartz's dowry was $4,000. From this money, Isaac Schumann gave $1,000 toward his sister's dowry, who was married through Aronson to a new paper box manufacturer. Both marriages took place on the same day. This helped the young paper box maker, who was having money problems. It cut the wedding expenses in half. The few $100s Aronson got as fees from that deal just helped the family during the holidays. Midwinter, Leah met a nice young man who studied dentistry in the day and worked as a waiter at night. He was not from the area, so he was not in her father's notebook. He had already kissed Leah's hand, even though she said, "Please don't," when Aronson found out by accident at Schumann's house. Aronson always visited his couples often in the first year of their marriage. In his mind, he thought he guaranteed his matches for a year, like some cheap watches. In 2 weeks, the future dentist was convinced by the marriage broker that getting married was a better job than working at night in a restaurant, and the deal was made. For a year's board and lodging and a promise of $1,000 when the young man finished his studies, Schwartz got a doctor for his second daughter. There was some argument about the fee. Aronson said that a year's board was worth $1,000, so they owed him brokerage on $2,000. But it was all settled nicely. The matchmaker had to buy a new coat for himself. Rent was also overdue, and he had no money. Leah was 21. Leah was 22, and Leah was 23. And the best husbands in the area were given away by her father to other girls, one for 2 months' rent, one for a winter coat, and one for a long overdue bill at the grocery store. Leah's cheeks were now a little pale, her lips a little thin. As the shoemaker's children walked barefooted, Leah was left without a husband because her father was a matchmaker. There was not much hope for a dowry. The best matches failed because of that modern thing, love. It was Aronson's greatest enemy. No matter how much he fought it by saying that all love matches were failures, love matches happened more and more. A new kind of people came to Old Harlem. Men who didn't care about old customs. People whose backgrounds nobody knew. They didn't light candles on Friday night and rode in cars on Saturday. Girls and young men walked arm in arm on the street and laughed loudly without shame. Aronson complained bitterly. His old job was no longer needed. Lib, what about our daughter? Don't worry about your daughter. There are no Jewish nunneries. With God's help, she will marry too. He had an eye on a certain young widow with a little money and a young man who needed money. He invited the young man for tea, and Mrs. Adler was to come in casually to visit Mrs. Aronson. That old samovar was to be used again. Leah was watching. She was smart now. That young man was to be hers. She placed her chair facing the young man and sat near the widow to give him a chance to compare them. The young man was very shy, so the widow also pretended to be shy. But Leah was in her best mood and even sang as she poured tea for everyone. She made Mrs. Adler look 20 years older by comparison and made the young widow so angry that she left the table with tears in her eyes. The deal with the widow fell through. He did not like her. She was too old. 2 months later, Leah married the young man. She made him fall in love with her behind her father's back. Aronson was studying his little notebook for a suitable match for the man when the young couple came into the room and announced that they were just married by the alderman of the district. The marriage broker could not forgive his daughter. Not only had she robbed him of a possible fee, but she had also ruined his business. People would point at him and say, "A marriage broker, and his daughter made a love match.